This is what you need for your own personal safety, is making sure you have cash on hand for emergencies. I want that for you. I want you to reduce your stress and anxiety. The only way to do this, though, is to have a cash cushion, which is why we talk about the emergency fund so much and the 1-3-6 method. Credit card debt is robbing you and your family of the ability to have financial freedom. Money can reduce your stress and it can reduce your anxiety. Now, today, we're going to be diving into 25 plus scary money statistics. And we do this every single year in October. And this is actually Halloween week, which is right on time for those scary money statistics. As we go through this, we're going to be looking at a bunch of eye-opening trends that are happening in 2024. I'm going to kind of talk through some of these trends that are happening. I'm going to give you actionable solutions to each of these statistics. And I'm going to make sure that you can try to avoid these statistics if at all possible. Some of these are really, really surprising. So I want you to tune in here because some of these are pretty shocking even to me. And I'm going to give you these real strategies that you can use day in and day out to make a huge impact on your finances. If that's something you're into, let's get into it. All right. So number one is 78% of Americans still live paycheck to paycheck. Now, let's start this off right now. A lot of people out there are in the paycheck to paycheck cycle. And if you are in the paycheck to paycheck cycle, this does not mean that you do not have a high income. There are people with a very high income who still live paycheck to paycheck. So there are two reasons why you're in the paycheck to paycheck cycle. One is you are not making enough money and you can't cut back anymore and you're just living paycheck to paycheck. You are stuck in this cycle where you can't save any money, you can't give yourself a cushion, and you don't know where to turn. And so the number one thing, if you are in that situation, that you need to focus on is looking for ways to increase your income. Now, that is way easier said than done. I know that, and I say that every time we talk about this. But looking for ways to increase the amount that you're making is very, very important. But on the other side of the coin, if you are someone who's making 80, 90, 100, 150,000 a year, 200,000 per year, and you are still just getting by, then we need to assess your spending and where your dollars are going, and if you're spending money on your values. Now, folks that live in the paycheck to paycheck cycle typically do not have any emergency funds saved up whatsoever. And so what you need to be doing is first, making sure you have that cushion in place, because a lot of folks in the paycheck to paycheck cycle stay in that paycheck to paycheck cycle because something happens in life that surprises them. And so they go backwards. Either they go into debt or they just barely get by with the extra cash that they have on hand in order to just get through that situation and move on with their life. But if you do not plan for those emergencies, if you do not plan for those emergency expenses, then you will never get out of this paycheck to paycheck cycle. So it's incredibly important for you to make sure that you have some sort of financial cushion there. Now, another way to make sure that you get out of this paycheck to paycheck cycle is to automate as much as you possibly can. Automating your money into various savings buckets is so powerful. We just had an episode recently talking about how to automate your money into savings buckets if you did not hear that episode. And so that talks through exactly how you can do this process. We call it the bucket saving method. And so when you go through that process, you'll see automating is the way to go. So really important for most of you listening today. If you are in the paycheck to paycheck cycle, start to work your way through this process to get yourself out of that paycheck to paycheck cycle. And your goal really is to make sure that you're tracking every single dollar that you're spending. If you're tracking your spending every single month, then you can start to see patterns of where your money is going. And is there places you can cut back? Maybe, but maybe not. The biggest problem for people with low incomes is you can't cut back anymore. And so you're listening to all these financial gurus out there telling you, hey, cut back more on this, cut back more on that. Well, sometimes there's nowhere else to cut back. And so we have to focus on getting some financial cushion and increasing our income. That's the only options that you can have at times. And so let's work on that, work on different areas of your finances today. Let's see what you can do today and try to get yourself at least some sort of financial cushion. Now, along the same lines, number two is that nearly 70% of Americans have less than $1,000 in their savings. So the average emergency is right around $2,300. And the average person out there has less than $1,000 in their savings. This is not good, folks. And if you are a person who has less than $1,000 in your savings, let me show you how to solve this problem. It is through something called automation. So I want you to get yourself a high yield savings account. I want you to set up a high yield savings account. You can do this through Ally Bank. You can do this through a number of different places. SoFi, there's a number of different places that have high yield savings accounts. And what I want you to do is set up one automation into your savings account. And I want you to start working towards a goal. Now, the real goal that I really want you to have is to have 1 month of your expenses saved in a high yield savings account. That's where I want you to start, is to get you 1 month of expenses saved in a high yield savings account. Now, you may be saying to yourself, well, I've tried that a number of different times. I just can't do it. Well, the automation is going to do it for you. You're going to automatically transfer money from your checking account when you get directly paid, and you are going to transfer it every single month, or maybe it's twice a month if you can't trust yourself with your paycheck, and you're going to transfer it directly into that high yield savings account automatically. You can do this very simply. You log into your high yield savings account, connect your checking account, and automatically do transfers. And it's going to say, hey, how frequently do you want to do these transfers? You're going to do it monthly or biweekly, whatever you think works for you. But automatically doing this is going to be really important. Then I want you to gradually increase this amount over time, because as you start to make more, or as you get those small raises for inflation, and or as you get more disciplined with your money, I want you to gradually increase those automatic transfers over to that savings account. This is unacceptable, and I want nobody who listens to this show regularly to have less than $1,000 in their savings account. I know you can do this. I believe that you can do this. And once you get past this first goal of having that $1,000 in that savings account, and you start pushing towards 1 month of your monthly expenses in a savings account, you're going to be so much better off financially. See, people who don't have savings can't take advantage of opportunities, for example. Say, for example, someone asks you to take a job that pays triple what you make now, but you have to move across the country. If you don't even have $1,000 in your savings, you're never going to be able to take advantage of this. Or here's another example, is recently I live in Tampa, Florida. We just had a huge hurricane hit, and there was a lot of people who could not evacuate. This hurricane was looking like a Category 5 at some point, and so people started to evacuate. I evacuated. I left and went to Alabama. I went over to Georgia. And when I left, I started to see people coming out with TikToks in the area or Instagram Reels in the area saying, hey, where are you guys getting this evacuation money from? I don't have evacuation money. And this is the problem. This is what you need for your own personal safety, is making sure you have cash on hand for emergencies. These are examples of reasons why it would reduce your stress and it would reduce your anxiety to make sure you save up some sort of cash. Now, if you're in that paycheck to paycheck cycle and you are in the thick of it right now, you are in the thick of it where you're saying to yourself, I don't know what I'm going to do next. I'm just trying to think of the next day. How am I going to save up enough money for an entire month? Then we need to focus on your income. We need to focus on your skills, growing your skills. Maybe we need to take on a second job if you have the time and the wherewithal to do so. Maybe we need to start a side hustle in order to make enough money to build up this cushion. You owe it to yourself to do this so you don't have to be stressed about money anymore. You don't have to be anxious about money anymore. I want that for you. I want you to reduce your stress and anxiety. The only way to do this, though, is to have a cash cushion, which is why we talk about the emergency fund so much and the 1-3-6 method. It's really, really important to do that, because the next stat is the scariest, honestly, maybe of this entire list. 51% of Americans would completely run out of money in 1 month if they lost their income. This, my friends, is a really big problem, because if you're in that situation, you are one person's decision away from not being in financial ruin. Say, for example, your boss decides one day, hey, they want to make cuts and they want to cut back your department. If you don't have a month's worth of expenses saved up, what are you going to do? What exactly is your plan? You have to have this emergency fund saved up, and you have to start building towards that. So here's what I want you to do first. Boom. I want you to review your monthly expenses. I want to pull those expenses out if you're in this scenario, and I want you to review those expenses. Identify any non-essential items that you have on that list and start to call up and cut back on things. Maybe this is like prioritizing subscriptions, for example. Look at all your subscriptions. Do you need all those subscriptions? Can you start to build up some savings there? Look at your housing. Are you spending too much money on rent? Do you need to get a roommate? Do you need to change that situation? If you're spending more than 30% of your income on rent, then we need to make a shift, and we'll talk about housing a little more later. Look at your food. Are you spending too much on groceries every single month? Add it up. Get the real numbers and add it up and see if you're spending too much on groceries every single month. Look at transportation. Do you have a massive car payment? Look there and see those big three things. If you can control those three expenses, housing, food, transportation, you can spend a lot on everything else as long as those three expenses are controlled, which will give you extra dollars to go towards other things. But you have to be able to look at those things and really make some real decisions. Now, your ultimate goal is to have 6 months expenses saved in that emergency fund in that high yield savings account. That's your ultimate goal. But if you can't even get by with 1 month, and 51% of people in America cannot get by with just 1 month. If they lost their job in 1 month, they'd run out of money. It is really, really scary. Now, you can use resources like Monarch Money. It is a great budgeting app in order to make sure that you are on track and you can see your spending plan. But you can also download bank statements, go through it, just add it up, and start to make financial decisions based on data. If you don't have data backing you up, then you're just using your opinion to try to make decisions, and that is not the wisest choice that you can make. Number 4. Is over the course of the last year, consumers reported losing over $10 billion to online fraud. Now, you know, one big thing I talk about a lot on this podcast, especially on Money Q&A episodes, because we get a lot of questions on this, is we get questions on how to protect your finances online, specifically protect yourself against fraud. I just got a letter in the mail, again, the other day. I mean, it feels like I'm giving and reporting things that are happening to me constantly about this kind of stuff, that a healthcare company that had some of my wife's information, had a big data breach. And they had this huge data breach. They lost a ton of information. And because of that, now someone has my wife's information that has it in the wrong hands. And so you need to protect yourself against this. Every single time this happens to you, it's going to feel normal at some point in time because it's going to be starting to happen so frequently, but you need to start taking action on your personal protection plan. If you don't have a financial protection plan in place, you need to get one. One is you need to learn how to freeze your credit. Now, we have a listener who sent in a really cool system of how they froze their credit. And we're going to be talking through that in a future Money Q&A coming up here, where they can do it in a minute and a half with all three big credit bureaus. So make sure you're subscribed to this podcast. We're going to be talking about that in that episode. But one, you need to learn how to freeze your credit. This blocks for people who get your personal information from opening up credit cards in your name, opening up home loans in your name. And it's a way for you to tell all the credit bureaus, hey, I am not opening up anything in my name right now. Please freeze my credit and do not do anything unless I authorize you to unfreeze my credit. That's how it works. So you're going to notify all three credit bureaus, freeze my credit. I'm not doing anything right now. I'm not applying for a home loan. I'm not applying for a car loan. I'm not applying for a credit card. And then when I unfreeze my credit, then you can apply for whatever you want and then freeze it back up again. This protects you big time against fraudsters out there. And so everybody listening needs to be freezing their credit who is listening to this podcast. Number 2, using services like Delete Me, who can remove your personal information from online. So Delete Me is a service that I use. I talk about it a lot because I love it so much. And Delete Me is a service that I use that goes out there and they go find your personal information. They remove your personal information from data brokers. Now, why is this important? Why is it so important for your personal information to get removed from data brokers? The reason for that is because when you go and you have a data breach, for example, and they get a piece of your personal information. Sometimes when they have data breaches, they only get your name, maybe they get your address, maybe they only get your social security number. But when you have a data breach, they're going to at least get a piece of your personal information. And what they can do is they can go to data brokers and they can say, hey, do you have any other information on this specific person? And when they do that, they can buy your information from data brokers. And there are not very many laws and legislations around how data brokers can use and sell your information. So you have to go out there and get your personal information removed from those data brokers. And in order to do so, you have to go and either write them a letter, you can send them an email, you can do all these different things. Delete Me does all that for you. And they do it at a really affordable price. And so you don't have to think about this. It could take you hours and hours and hours. They removed my information from thousands of different data brokers. And what I want you to do is just check out joindeleteme.com/PFP20, and you can get 20% off Delete Me through my code. It is by far my favorite service out there and one that I use all the time. Next is I want you, every single website that you use online, this is the most obvious thing in the world, but guess what? Most of you don't do it. And so I'm going to keep reminding you, but it's making sure that you have really complicated passwords online. And the reason for this is if someone gets even a slight piece of your information or your password, these data breaches, a lot of times they have your password on file and they get a hold of that. If they get a hold of your password and that's the password you use for 10 different websites, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to have a major problem here because they have your email and they quite possibly have your password for a bunch of different websites. So I like a service like 1Password, which what 1Password does is they keep all your passwords in one secure location, and then all you have to do is remember the password to 1Password. And what they'll do is they'll also customize new passwords for each and every single website. So it's a bunch of jumbled numbers and letters and really complicated passwords that is going to help protect you over that time frame. Now, also, make sure you're also monitoring your credit reports. So you can go to annualcreditreport.com to make sure that you are monitoring if anybody's pulling credit on you or anything like that. You can do things like Identity Guard for ongoing maintenance, but really making sure you're going through and using 1Password, you're using Delete Me, you're using the credit freezing systems are all going to be really, really important. Number 5 is credit card debt has reached $1.15 trillion. Now, let's get something straight right now. If you're listening to this podcast and you are in credit card debt, this is a pants-on-fire emergency. Why? Because credit card debt means that you are paying a very high interest rate and borrowing money for something that you probably don't even value. And when you have credit card debt, it is absolutely destroying your wealth building ability. Credit card debt is robbing you and your family of the ability to have financial freedom. And your entire goal, the reason why you're probably listening to this podcast, is because you want to have financial freedom. You want safety, you want security, and you want to be able to have that freedom with your money. And I want that for you more than anything. It's the entire reason why we do this show is to bring you as much value as possible and teach you that financial freedom is possible. But the only way that you can do this is A, getting rid of your credit card debt. This is the second thing that you should be doing with your finances is you're going to get that 401k match. And then what you're going to do is build up at least 1 month of emergency fund. And then I want you to pay off high interest debt, specifically credit card debt. Credit card debt is the enemy to anybody out there. Now, credit cards are not the enemy. I am a big proponent of using credit cards. You get points, you get some great protection with credit cards. And so there's a lot of reasons to use credit card, but credit card debt going beyond 1 month spending is really important. So let's get into some of these rules. If you want to avoid credit card debt at all cost, first, anytime you spend money with your credit card, you need to already have the cash in your checking account ready to pay that off that day if you needed to. You're not going to spend ahead. You're not going to get ahead with your credit card. Instead, you need to have the cash on hand in your checking account, and that's how you verify if you can use your credit card. That's the only time you can use your credit card. You are not going to go backwards into credit card debt. That is going to reduce your net worth. It is going to change the entire dynamic of your financial situation if you go into credit card debt. Those interest rates at 10, 15, 20, 25% are so detrimental to your finances. I cannot stress this enough, okay? So you will never use a credit card. You will never pay a cent of interest, ever, and you will always pay off that card on time, at least monthly. But I like to pay it off weekly because I like to stay on top of it. Now, there's no big benefit to paying it off weekly. I just like to do it to stay on top of those credit card payments. Now, if you are in credit card debt, what I want you to do is I want you to list all of your credit card debts in order. If you just have one credit card, great. We have one to focus on. If you have multiple credit cards with debt on them, I want you to list them all in order of interest rate, okay? And then I want you to look and start to assess the situation here. I want you to say to yourself, well, is there one that's like $200 that you could just pay off really quickly and get rid of that one and then move on to the highest interest rate? Or do you want to go in interest rate order, meaning that you want to pay the highest interest rate first off, then you want to go down the line to the next highest, then the next highest, then the next highest. That's the faster way to do it, but it doesn't really make a huge difference. What I want you to do is focus on your personal psychology and which one is going to make you more motivated to get rid of this stuff. Is it to focus on something like the snowball method where you pay off the smallest balance first and then the next one, then the next one, then the next one? Or you want to reverse it and optimize it to the wrecking ball method. A lot of people call it the avalanche method, where you are paying off highest interest rate first and then going down the list. I personally would do the avalanche method, but it depends on your personal psychology if you were in that situation. And so use some of these resources and make sure you're looking at that. Also, if you are paying really high interest rates and you can find a balance transfer card that is 0% and you believe that you can pay off that card within whatever the time frame is that it is at 0%, maybe it's 6 months, 12 months, or 18 months, I would definitely take advantage of that so that you do not have to dig yourself out of a bigger hole. Instead of use that balance transfer card, but just be careful and make sure that you can pay it off in time. Otherwise, you're going to be paying a lot of interest at the end of that road. So making sure you understand how that works, really important, but I don't mind them as long as you have a plan in place to pay off that credit card debt. Number 6, and this is one of the saddest ones out here as well, is that 23% of credit card users go deeper into debt every single month. If you are going deeper into debt every single month and you are in credit card debt, you need to take out that credit card right now. Hey, let's all do it together. Let's pull that credit card out of your pocket. I wish I had a card I didn't want to use anymore on air here on YouTube, but pull that credit card out of your pocket. And what I want you to do is grab the biggest scissors you can find in the house. You know those big old kitchen scissors that you usually use to cut up the chicken breast, or maybe you have a samurai sword hanging on your wall. Maybe you got some sort of axe in your garage because you are a logger. Go grab whatever you got. Maybe you got a chainsaw, maybe not a chainsaw, but go grab whatever you got. And I want you to cut that credit card up, and I want you to get rid of that thing. And if you want a little credit card therapy, maybe put it on a punching bag, give it a couple of punches because it's stealing away your financial freedom, but then take it and throw it away. The last thing I want for you is to allow that credit card to get you deeper into debt. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of that card. We're going to switch to cash, or we're going to switch to a debit card until we get out of this situation. And we're probably going to do it for a while afterwards as well. Because if you can't trust yourself with credit cards now, I don't think you should try to trust yourself with credit cards here in the very near future. And so what we're going to do is we're going to switch to cash or debit card when we pay for everything. And we're going to cut that credit card out. Now, if you don't have a credit card problem, more power to you. Use your cards all day long. Ball all day long. Make it rain credit cards. But if you do have a credit card problem and you are in credit card debt and you're going deeper into debt, if you're part of that 23%, it's time to get rid of it. It is the problem. That's what you need to understand. So then I want you to create a monthly budget that prioritizes making sure that you pay off that debt. If you don't know how to create a budget, we can help you with that. Just reach out to us and we can help you through that process. And then I want you to set up alerts for spending limits on certain budget categories. So you can do this like with Monarch Money, for example, but you can also do this in a bunch of different ways with your bank if you want to do it in a free way. So there's a bunch of different ways to do that, but I want you utilizing and tracking your spending. It is so important that you're doing this, especially if you're in debt. Every dollar matters, and you want to throw as many dollars as possible towards that debt because these high interest rates are using compound interest in reverse against you, and that's the last thing I want you to do. Number 7 is debt is peaking between ages 40 to 49. This is a scary stat for a number of reasons. People that are in their 40s, you are in your peak years of setting yourself up for retirement because in the next decade, you are going to start to really get that all situated. So if you're in your 40s and you are peaking at debt, friends, we got to make sure that this does not happen. Now, this could happen for a number of different scenarios. Hey, if you have kids, you know how expensive kids can get. I know how expensive kids can get. I've got number 3 coming any day now. And so because of that, I'm spending a lot of money on daycare. I'm spending a lot of money on extracurricular activities. Andrew Jr.'s jiu-jitsu is not going to pay for itself, my friends. And so there's a lot of different things that we got to make sure that we are budgeting out for, especially in your 30s and your 40s. But folks in your 40s, if you are going deeper into debt for a number of different reasons, maybe you're having a midlife crisis and you bought that brand new Corvette that you've always wanted. Maybe you are paying for your kids' college and it's just difficult and you feel like you have to because you don't want them to go into debt. Maybe you're just trying to get through life and get by day to day and you've never had money in your entire life. Or maybe you have a really high income and you just have a real bad spending problem. Real bad. Well, let's talk about this because what I really want you to do is I want you to make sure that you are avoiding this debt and not letting it peak anymore. You got to say this to yourself right now. I'm never going to let this happen anymore. So what you're going to do is take the time and take the steps in order to A, stop going into debt, B, focusing on removing any high interest debt first, and then C, starting to take those extra dollars once you actually get rid of that debt and investing them towards your retirement. Retirement is coming up, folks. It is going to be real soon here if you're in your 40s, and that time is going to fly by, so you got to make sure that you are investing those dollars for retirement. It is so incredibly important, okay? Attack that debt in your 40s if you are in your 40s. Along the same lines, as we are still on debt here, millennials carry an average of $125,047 in debt. Now, let's talk about debt for a second because we have high interest debt, which is 6% or above, and there's also low interest debt. And low interest debt can be a number of different things. It could be your mortgage, which I don't really think that, especially if you're a millennial, this is not a huge priority that you need to pay off if you got like a 3% mortgage or a 2% mortgage. I got my mortgage in COVID. It's like a 2.5% interest rate. I'm not paying that thing off anytime soon. It'd probably be one of the last things I did in my financial situation is pay off that mortgage at 2.5%. And so because of this, I don't care that I have that debt. Some people care about it. And if debt really bothers you when you have low interest debt, more power to you. You can go ahead and pay that debt off if it keeps you up at night or it increases your stress and it increases your anxiety. Then go for being debt free. I don't care. But it's not the most optimized way to do this. The most optimized way is focus on high interest debt and invest those extra dollars instead if you got low interest debt. And so when you're thinking about this, make sure you're thinking about this in a way that makes sense for your specific situation and how your temperament is and how you react to specific financial situations. Really important to do that in bringing up a repayment plan. Now, a lot of other millennials are in debt because of student loans. And student loans are something that a lot of us are struggling. A lot of people have struggled with for a long time. And you can get into student loan situations where you have a high interest rate and it feels like you're never getting anywhere. I know people who are in their late 50s still paying off their student loans. And so this is a tough position to be in, but you got to have a plan in place, especially if you have high interest for student loans. They need to go. And so just making sure that you avoid that at all costs is going to be really important. Along those same lines, student loan debt has reached $1.6 trillion. And so I want you to look at a number of different options. One, if you have student loan debt, it may not be the highest priority for you, but I want you to check eligibility for income-driven repayment plans. You may be able to reduce your repayment plans through your loan servicer because of that. Secondly, I want you to look into refinancing options if you have a high interest rate. Try to refinance into lower interest rates and make sure it makes sense with the closing costs and run the numbers on that, but look to refinance if you can. And then also research forgiveness programs if you are really struggling with your student loans. If there is a forgiveness program out there that can help you, take advantage of it. More power to you. Like people get mad when they talk about student loan forgiveness because they paid off their loans. Hey, I get it. I paid off my loans. I understand it, but at the same time, I want you to become wealthy. That's what I want for every single one of you. So I want you to take advantage of that stuff. Use the opportunities in front of you to make yourself successful personally. So if you have forgiveness programs that you can use, make sure you do that. So you can go to studentaid.gov is a great place to start to find detailed information on repayment plans and forgiveness options. That's a great place to start to look through this. Now, number 10 is along the same lines. 44% of Americans cannot afford a $500 emergency expense. So we saw at the beginning of the show that there were 51% of Americans would run out of money in 1 month. 70% of Americans have less than $1,000 in savings. And now we're saying 44% of Americans don't even have $500. If that's you, I'm hoping you are listening to what we're saying here and redirecting as many dollars as possible into your savings. Number 11, 47% of Americans tend to spend more than they earned. This means that almost half of Americans spend more than they earn every single month. Now, this can be for a number of different reasons. This can be because inflation is high, but this can also be because you have bad spending habits. And so I want you to focus on some of those habits. We're going to talk more about those here in these episodes as we're talking through this, so you can learn how to change some of those habits. So make sure you're subscribed to this podcast. Number 12, this is a huge one, and this is one I want you to focus a lot of your time on if you do not already, is that 56% of workers feel underpaid. 56% of workers feel underpaid. Now, what I want you to do is if you feel underpaid, I want you to learn, number one, how to negotiate your salary. This is one of the most important skills that you could ever learn. Now, this is not just negotiating your salary at a brand new job. I want you to also learn the system of how to negotiate your salary at your day job. Now, I'm going to explain it here. We also have a free ebook that kind of walks you through these exact processes. So if you go to mastermoney.co/resources, we have a bunch of amazing free resources for you guys. But I want you to look at the one called Finally Get That Raise. It's a free ebook that shows you step-by-step how to do this. Now, I'm going to explain this here now so you understand how to do this, but I also want you to implement this here in the future. So the way that this works is we teach you how to get a raise at your day job by actually doing a specific system that is not a get a raise quick system. This is a system that takes about 6 months before you actually get a raise. And so when we teach this system, it is one of the most eye-opening things for people. It is so cool to watch people's eyes light up when we teach this system because for the most part, when people do this, they either will find out a lot about their employer and if they want to stay employed at this company and if they will ever give them a raise, or they will be able to actually get a raise. And we've had so many people write in thanking us for teaching them how to get a raise. So here's how it works. Step one is I want you to set up a meeting with your boss. And I want you to have this conversation with them saying to them, hey, I have been in this position for X amount of time, and I want to get to the next level. I want to make more money, or I want to get a promotion. And I want to get to that next level. What things do I need to be doing in this department in order to take that next step to get to the next level? And you want to, maybe you can suggest some things. Maybe it is increasing revenue at the bottom line, depending on where you work. Maybe it is increasing productivity. Maybe it is taking on projects that your boss does not want to take on anymore, and they're going to go up to bat for you to get that raise. You got to figure out what those actual items are. Now, what this is going to do is, this is going to set up expectations for both of you. Hey, I'm going to be doing this stuff over the course of the next 6 months, but I expect when my quarterly review comes up, which you want to time this around when your quarterly review is going to happen 6 months prior to it. Then when your yearly review comes up, you're going to have a couple of conversations where nobody's caught off guard when you ask for more money. So this first meeting is going to happen 6 months before that yearly review. And you're going to have that conversation with your boss and write down everything that you guys talk about. When you leave that meeting with your boss, what I want you to do is then send them an email about everything you talked about. So now it's in writing. It's fresh in their mind. You just had the conversation. You said, hey, thank you so much for speaking with me. Here's exactly what I'm going to be doing over the course of the next 6 months to make sure that we are on the same page and the same target here so that I can move up to the next level. Now, you can word that in the corporate way, or you can do it in whatever professional way you want to do it. But making sure that you send that email right after is very, very important. Then what I want you to do is 3 months down the line, you're going to schedule another meeting with your boss, and you're going to do a check-in, okay? So now that you have that scheduled, 3 months down the line, we're going to do a check-in of where you are. In between that time, I want you to start preparing a couple of things. I want you to start preparing, A, what you want to make at that day job. B, I want you to start preparing comparables to other people within your specific state, within your specific city, of how much they're making in comparable jobs. If you do it in New York City and you live in the middle of Alabama, that is not comparable. You need to make sure that you understand where your location is, because cost of living is higher in New York City than it is in Alabama. Cost of living is significantly higher in Silicon Valley than it is in Alabama. So you got to make sure you are doing it specific to your location, okay? Then, I've talked about Alabama twice in this episode. That's the first time ever. Next, what we're going to do is then you are going to start to compile all this information. Then you're going to meet with your boss again. And you're going to do the things that they asked you to do over the course of 3 months. You're going to say, hey, I started to take on this project, and I started to lead these team meetings, and I started to do this, this, and this, everything that we talked about here. I just want to make sure we're on track and we are on pace for what we want to be doing. And they're going to say yes, they're going to say no, and then you make adjustments based on whatever that conversation goes. But this 3 months is to remind them. Your boss is very, very busy. They're going to forget that you had this conversation, or 3 months down the line, they're going to be like, they forgot about it. We had the conversation initially, but they forgot about what we were talking about. You got to make sure you're checking in and that you both are on the same page. That is really important in this communication process. Once that is done, then 1 month before your yearly review, you're going to check in again. And you're going to say to your boss, hey, this is what I've been doing. This is what I've done. I expect to be making more here. Just want to make sure I'm checking in. We're on the same page. Okay? So you're continuing that communication. And then when you walk in on the day of your yearly review, what's going to happen is both of you are going to know which direction this is going to go in. And you've been doing the work. You've accomplished what they've asked you to do. And if they do not give you that raise, you give them a certain time frame of asking, when can I get that raise? If they don't give you a time frame, then you know this place may never give you a raise, and it might be time to move on. Or they might give you that raise. And a lot of times, most people that we've talked to, they give them that raise because they had the conversation and they stayed in communication. This is how you make more money at your day job, is you stay in constant communication with your boss, and you do it in a very specific and systematic way. This is not something that you're going to be doing in a way that where you just walk into your boss's office on the day of your review and you say, hey, I want more money, because this is what most people do. And they walk in frustrated and mad, and they just catch their boss off guard. I've had employees in my companies do that to me. I've had them do it to me recently, where I had no idea that they wanted to make more money. And so they've come to me and said, I want to make more money during their yearly review. And I say, lay out the case for me. And usually I let them talk as much as I possibly can. And the reason for this is I want to hear their entire case. And usually they don't have it prepared, or their case is based off frustration or dealing with frustrating customers or specific things like that, instead of actual data of why they should make more money. So I actually teach them this process of how to do this with me. And once they learn this process, it is one of those things that I think is really, really beneficial for a lot of people. So really cool to kind of show the process and the data for this. But check out that ebook if you want to learn more about that. I also give information if you work remotely on how to do this in a bunch of different ways remotely. So just make sure that you are going through this process and trying to make more money. Because if you feel underpaid, which I'm sure most of you listening do, if 56% of workers feel underpaid, most people do. And if you're in that situation, I want you to learn about salary negotiation. All right, so next let's talk about car loans. And we've kind of lumped the stats for car loans all under one category here for number 13. And what we're going to be talking through here is a bunch of different things. The average car payment for new vehicles has now increased to $734. For most people, they're not going to be able to afford that if they live into the parameters that we talk about. Now, what are those parameters? I want you to at least put 20% down or have gap insurance, have that car loan for 4 years or less, and 7% or less of your gross income should be spent on monthly car payments. What does that mean? Well, what that means is that, for example, let's say you make $100,000 per year. Let's make this math easy, okay? And if you make $100,000 per year, that means that you'd be able to spend $7,000 per year on your car payment and still be financially responsible is kind of the goal here. But your car loan has to be 4 years or less, okay? Really, I want you to have closer to 3 years, but 4 years or less is fine. So 7% on your car payment. And so that means your car payment cannot be more than $583 if you make $100,000 per year. Most people do not make $100,000 per year, and the average car payment is $734. That's a scary statistic because it's a depreciating asset that goes down in value over time. Now, do you need a car? Absolutely. But you don't need the fanciest jacked up truck, or you don't need the brand new Tahoe with black rims. Instead, you need what you can afford. And really, when it comes to money, controlling this expense, this is the number one wealth killer for most people, is their cars. And so if you can control this expense, it will pay dividends forever for you. Now, if you're not going to get a car loan, I'd prefer you to pay in cash. That'd be better overall. So if you can do that, that'd be great as well. But making sure that you keep your car loans within those parameters or less is very, very important. Now, the average car payments for used and leased vehicles is now $525 for used cars. So that's probably closer to where the average American should be, is where those used vehicles are. The average amount borrowed for a new vehicle is $40,927, and Americans owe $1.626 trillion on auto loans now. This is the highest it's ever been, and this could be for a number of different reasons, but it is 9.1% of American consumer debt. 9.1%. And this is something where I think a lot of people are getting themselves into trouble because of their car payments. You can see it. I see people in my neighborhood, and I know they're not making the amount of money of their cars that they drive. I just saw somebody in my neighborhood got a brand new Cybertruck wrapped up beautifully in this weird blue color, and then their spouse got a brand new G-Wagon. In the house they live in, I'd be very surprised if they could actually afford those cars. Now, maybe they do. Maybe they can. More power to them. But I'm judging you. I'm judging you for those cars because I don't think you can afford them. And so I'm probably one of the only people that would judge them. Most people are probably thinking how cool they look or how cool they would be looking in those cars. But anyways, that was a fun tangent. So that is a big thing that you need to focus on, is making sure that you are controlling your car payments, because it can really be a detriment to you. Now, also making sure that your auto loan is not high interest debt. If you have high interest debt right now, especially at the time recording this, make sure you try to refinance that auto loan into a lower interest debt situation. The best way to do this, honestly, is your local credit union. Your local credit union usually has really good interest rates, especially if you have a decent credit score. And so making sure you can try to refinance into some of those options is going to be really beneficial. Now, the dealership might try to sell you on some crappy loan. And if you didn't get pre-financed before you bought a car, maybe you didn't know, or maybe you just didn't do it, go to the credit union, say, hey, I want to refinance this car. What are your rates? They'll give you the rates, and then you can refinance pretty simply. It takes like literally less than 30 minutes to do it. So not a really big deal. As long as you have a pretty good credit score, you'll get a pretty good rate there. Number 14, this is on home loans and mortgages. Americans owe $12.04 trillion in mortgage debt, making it the largest debt category in the U.S. That's very much expected. The average mortgage interest rate in 2024 for a 30-year fixed loan is 7.2%. Now that, my friends, is the scary stat, because I really don't like you toting that line of that high interest rate at 7%. So what we need to do is we need to watch where rates go if you have this high interest rate. And what I want you to do is see, hey, they just adjusted down 0.5% at the time recording this. If they continue to adjust down, I want you to make sure that you are making adjustments to your rate. It is going to, it is making your payments way higher than they need to be. And so most Americans, if they have a 7.2% interest rate, they are probably spending too much on their housing costs. They're probably spending more than 30% of their income on housing. And because of that, you are making yourself house poor. You got to make sure that you are very careful about this because lenders will lend you too much money on your house. They are not the end-all, be-all of where your money needs to go, which is funny because a lot of these lenders are also trying to be financial gurus now on TikTok. Anyways, so that is another thing that you really need to think through. I'm getting spicy today. And so one thing you need to do is make sure that you are reducing that interest rate by refinancing and watching rates. Now, it may not make sense if it's like 0.5%. You got to make sure that you are looking at the closing costs and how much those are going to cost before you do the refinancing. But it is time to refinance if you can get like a rate around 5-4%, somewhere in that range, then it definitely is time to refinance because it is a drastic difference. So just make sure you do the math on that. Mortgage delinquency rates actually remain low at 3.2%. So that's positive news. And then some of the things that you should do, and then the average mortgage payments for new loans is getting closer and closer to $3,000 a month. So this is something I think that, again, you really need to make sure that you're controlling your housing expenses. Now, the same goes for rent. It needs to be 30% or less of your costs need to be spent on housing. This includes home repairs, maintenance, and all those other things. So if you are a person who has not run the numbers on your home situation yet, we have something called the Total Cost of Ownership Calculator. It's completely free. And if you go to mastermoney.co/resources, you can run the numbers on your biggest home purchase ever. For some people, if you're looking to buy a house, it may not actually make as much sense as you think it does. It is not the key to building wealth in America. The American dream is to own your own home, and it is amazing to own your own house. I've owned my own home for over 10 years, but I did not do it for financial reasons. I did it for other reasons like stability, having a family. I like to do home renovations. All of those are great reasons to own a home. Financial is not a great reason to own a home. So make sure that you understand that and use that total cost of ownership calculator. Now, people would love to argue back with me on this. And they love to say, hey, my home is an amazing investment. Look how much it's gone up every single year. But have you factored in all the extra costs, the maintenance costs, how much it costs you to mow the lawn, how much it costs you to do all those things, the cost to repair your home, the capital expenditures, which are things like when your roof goes bad, when you have to paint the house, things like when you have to replace the air conditioner, the big expenditures that you have, all adds up to being not that great of a return. And historically, people who have actually run the numbers on this know that. And so the total cost of ownership calculator will show you exactly why that is. Make sure you understand how that works first. 15, this is one that's newer and one that we're going to be talking about a little bit more, is sports betting. 62% of Americans reported gambling in the last 12 months, wagering an average of $1,027 each. That's a lot of money. Most Americans do not have $1,000 saved in an emergency fund, but they are wagering over $1,000 each on sports gambling. Men average $1,294, while women, no surprise for men, while women average $433 in bets. Gen Z gamblers wagered the most, averaging $1,885. Now, one thing about sports gambling is I do it. It's not something that I don't do. I enjoy it. It makes me actually enjoy games more. I specifically do it for football games. I don't do it really for anything else. But I give myself a very specific limit every single week, and that limit is a lot less than probably what most people have. And I cannot gamble more than that every single week. I have no problem if you're hitting your retirement goals and you are making sure that you are doing the things that you need to be doing with your money. You have an emergency fund. You have everything else saved up and ready to go. I have no problem with you sports gambling because it's like spending money on a hobby. But if you do not have an emergency fund, if you're not maxing out your Roth IRA, if you're not hitting your retirement goals, if you're not investing in an HSA or a 401k, if you're not doing any of those things, or you're not hitting the goals that you need to be hitting, my friends, what are we doing sports gambling? This is not something we should even be remotely thinking about with our money. Now, you may have hit it big a couple of different times, and now you think you're going to be able to do this over and over again. Let me just tell you, it's great to have fun with it. It makes the game, I get it. It makes the game more enjoyable. I do it. But it is not something that you do, especially with big money. I almost want to say ever. And it's definitely not something you want to be doing when you do not hit your financial goals. Make sure you are hitting your financial goals. Stay strict with what you are doing with your dollars. And then if you want to do it as fun, or if you want to do it as a little hobby, or you enjoy doing it, make sure those dollars are small. You set those limits, and you are not gambling an extraordinary amount of money every single week. It is really important to do that. If you struggle with gambling, make sure you get support for that. That is something that there's a lot of foundations out there that will help you through that addiction. And it is a problem. It is an addiction. And if you struggle with that, make sure you talk to someone. Maybe you found this podcast and you're like, I have no money left. I've gambled it all away. Then make sure you get the help that you need. It is so incredibly important to do that as we go through this process. Number 16, this is a huge one for most people, is number 16. This is childcare costs. And this is one that is not talked about enough. Now, we did an entire episode talking about childcare costs and how to navigate these waters, because these waters are really tough to navigate. And it is something that most people feel like they're probably getting ripped off. If you have 1 or 2 kids, specifically in daycare, it's usually for younger kids. But if you have kids in daycare, or you have kids where you need childcare for them, they cannot, babysit themselves yet, or they don't have an older sibling, or they can't babysit themselves yet, then you're paying for childcare costs. And it is really, really expensive. Now, let me show you something, for example. People who bought a house post-2020 with high interest rates, people who have young kids who are in daycare, and people who have student loans, those are the millennials I feel the worst for. They're getting hit from all angles, and they are just trying to get by on all cylinders. It is one of the toughest things that you have to deal with. And there's been nothing like this in the history of the world. This is what people don't understand. There's been nothing like this to have these types of expenses. Oh, yeah. And let's mix in the fact that inflation is at record highs over the course of the last 4 years. If you're in that situation, sometimes you just got to throw your hands up and say, I'm going to do the best I can month in and month out. And then you're going to take personal responsibility, and we're going to get after it. We're going to throw our hands up. We're going to take a deep breath. We're going to put a plan together, and we're going to get after it together. That's the goal with me and you. Me and you right here. If you're watching on YouTube, mano y mano. We're going to get after it and try to make a plan here to get past all of this, because this is a season in your life. It will change and it will pass, but it is a very difficult season. Now, the average weekly cost of daycare is $321, which is a 13% increase from last year. The average weekly cost of a nanny is $766. Now, let me tell you this right now. I've had kids in daycare, which I have one in daycare now. One is in kindergarten, one is in daycare. And then I'm having a third on the way, and we'll figure out what we're doing there when the time comes. And actually, by the time this episode comes out, she might be born. We'll see. Very close to the due date. And so I've had kids in daycare, and we've had nannies. Nannies are definitely significantly more expensive than daycare, but you get the one-on-one experience. So if you can afford one, really the care of your child is the most important thing. So if you have the extra dollars and you can afford one, it is a great experience. At the same time, not everybody can afford that. You can see the difference there. It's like a $400 difference for weekly costs. That's $1,600 a month. It's a big, big difference. And so because of that, most people need to put their kids in daycare. And making sure you tour these daycares and making sure you understand how, what kind of care is going on is very important. Making sure they give you frequent updates throughout the day is also very important. And making sure they actually care. Honestly, that's the biggest thing, is making sure they actually care is going to be really important. But if you're dealing with this, there's not a ton you can do here. It's not like you can just magically not work and not put your kids in childcare. Now, in the episode where we talked about this, we talked about how to do the math to see if maybe you're on the fence if your spouse or you should stay home. If you're on the fence about that, I talk about how to do the math there and how to think through that process. It is a pretty detailed episode on childcare. I would say it's probably one of the most detailed ones I've ever heard. So if you want to check out that episode, we'll try to link it up down below in the show notes, and hopefully that will help you through that process. The next one is half of retirees fear outliving their savings. So if you fear outliving your savings, what we're going to do is we're going to do a little math here. And we're going to figure out, are we going to outlive our savings or not? So what we're going to do is we're going to do the 25X rule. And if you're pre-retirement, the 25X rule works really, really good. But when you're in retirement, what you can do is understand the 4% rule, meaning you can draw down 4% every single year of your portfolio and still be able to preserve your portfolio throughout your retirement. That's going to be a really important rule to understand. Now, if that is not enough for you, we need to also factor in Social Security. How much are you getting in Social Security? And is that going to help cover the difference? That's how you really can figure out, am I going to outlive my savings or not? And so if you have this fear, try to do the math first. And AARP also has websites like AARP has calculators, but there's also just calculators that you can use in retirement online that can help you through this process. But just figure out, how much do I have invested? Take 4% of that every single year. And that's how much you can live on and be able to preserve your wealth. And then add in Social Security, and hopefully that covers it enough for what you're trying to do. So that's how you do the math on that, so you can reduce that stress and anxiety if you have it. I'm sure it still lingers around. From what I understand, from what a lot of people have told me, is that it's one thing to kind of run all these calculations and these simulations, but once you actually retire, it is a whole other thing when you have to start drawing on the money, and it just, and it actually can be a fearful thing for a lot of people. So really important to kind of think through that and see exactly where you land. 18. This is one we've covered up a lot on how to do this already, but 37% of Americans have more credit card debt than retirement savings. Now, most people who are in credit card debt, I would assume, don't have a lot of retirement savings because they're not great with their money yet. And so if that is you, get that debt paid off, prioritize saving for retirement. You have money flipped if that is you, and you probably have a negative net worth. And so we got to work to get out of that. We have a free debt course, if that's you also, that will walk you through exactly how to get out of debt. If you go to mastermoney.co/courses, it is absolutely free. I never want to charge anybody who is in debt. And so we have a free debt course, and we want to teach you how to get out for free. It takes you about an hour, and you can go through that. It's a video course step by step. Number 19, 84% of Americans feel financial stress. Now, this is the most powerful thing that I think money can do, is money can reduce your stress and it can reduce your anxiety. And that is what I want for every single person who listens to this podcast. I believe money can bring some sources of happiness, meaning reducing stress, that's going to increase happiness, reducing anxiety, that's going to increase happiness, and it's going to help you just feel better about life. When I first started out in my career, I was living paycheck to paycheck. So if anybody's listening, living paycheck to paycheck, I feel you. And I was stressed about money all the time. Once I figured out how to start tracking my spending, getting my money together, starting to earn more money, starting to put those extra dollars towards retirement, starting to build up the emergency fund, and getting all these things in place, all of a sudden the stress melted away. And I remember the first time I experienced this, I had a car that needed a new transmission. And that needed a new part. I had a car that needed a new part that was going to cost me $2,500. And for the first time in my life, the money was just there. And because I had the cash just there, I did not have to stress about it. And I cannot tell you how amazing that feeling was to have cash on hand so that when an emergency came up, the money was just there. That was the most freeing thing. And my wife and I both looked at each other. We were early in our marriage and we said, this is amazing. And I can never go back. And that's one of the biggest fears I have, is going back to that feeling of like, where's my money going to be? Even though now that we've built wealth, we've become millionaires, but that's still one of the biggest fears, is falling back to those days, because it is the worst feeling in the world. And once you feel what it feels like to not have to feel that ever again, it is absolutely life-changing. That's why this podcast exists. I want every single person listening to this show to get the value to feel that feeling. It is absolutely amazing. And so working on your emergency fund, building up that 6-month emergency fund, making sure you have cash on hand in the high yield savings account, making sure that you are investing your money for your financial future and making the right financial decisions is the most important things. Otherwise, you're going to be living in a stressful cycle your entire life. And I don't want that for anybody listening to this show. Along those same lines, 44% of Americans are stressed about their lack of savings, and 56% of Americans are not saving enough for retirement. All of those fall into the same category. They are all really important to take care of. 58% of Gen Zers find budgeting intimidating. So listen, Gen Z, I'm going to put my hat backwards on YouTube so I can speak to you guys here. No cap, budgeting is not intimidating. In fact, budgeting is gas. So in all seriousness, let me explain this to you guys, because a lot of people get intimidated by budgeting, and it's not something you absolutely have to do. I don't want you to spend all your time budgeting and in spreadsheets and doing all this other stuff. Instead, I want you to make important decisions that are going to change your finances, actually. I don't want you to struggle cutting back on avocado toast or lattes or whatever you cut back on. Instead, what I want you to do is you have two options here. One, you can automatically start to set up automations on your money. We talk about that all the time. That's what our core value here is at Master Money, is you need to automate your money first. Secondly, though, is that you can do something called the reverse budget. And what the reverse budget is it is a way for you to save off the top. So your money comes in, you save off the top, and you spend what is left over. So you're taking care of your emergency fund and you're taking care of your retirement goals, and then you spend what is left over. What does this do? It gets you out of the spreadsheet, and it reduces your stress and anxiety around this stuff. It's pretty simple. So you're going to automatically save when you get paid, and then you're going to spend whatever is left over in that checking account. And that's how you manage your money. So it doesn't take you a bunch of time trying to figure out, did I spend too much on groceries here? No. Whatever's in your checking account, that's what you got. And so that's how you manage your money in a way that is much more freeing and much less stressful. Now, the reverse budget, one big thing that I think about that is it's a little easier when you have more money. Like when you have some extra cushion, because you can make mistakes with the reverse budget. So it's a lot easier to do when you have more money. When you have less money, you have to have a really good understanding of what your spending is and how much you're going to have coming in and what you're going to be spending here in the future. And so tracking that stuff is a little more important in your younger years, I think. But if you're intimidated by it, make sure you're just doing the reverse budget. And you can also use Monarch Money, a sponsor of this show, but it's also an amazing tool that I use every single day. And you can go out there and you can use my code PFP, you get 30-day free trial. And it's something I think that's really going to help you because it automates everything. It doesn't make it intimidating. They have tutorials. They show you how to do it. So don't get intimidated. Don't get intimidated by budgeting. Get after it. And if you have any questions on budgeting, please reach out to me. 23, nearly half of millennials regret not saving enough. So if you're a Gen Z, take lessons from your elder millennials here. Most of them regret not saving enough because they did not start early. And so starting early as possible is going to be really, really important. Another important reason to budget is the next one. 70% of Americans struggle to afford basic expenses. And nearly 50% of Gen Xers say they're behind on retirement savings. So really, if you look at every single age category, you're going to see people are stressed about money. You're going to see people are stressed about how much they've saved. You're going to see people are stressed and cannot take care of an emergency expense. And you're going to see that all of these scenarios are becoming increasingly important for people to have a financial education. And the reason why this podcast exists and the reason why we're even doing this episode is because I want you to understand how to do this stuff. And I want you to know that you can take control of your finances and it is in your power to change your financial life. What if you're the first person in your life? What if you're the first person in your family to actually take control of their finances and you can break that chain of poverty that your family has had forever and ever? Or maybe you were raised in a wealthy family and you were never taught this stuff and you don't know how to go out on your own and you're never given that financial character to build you up. Well, this is the time. You can teach yourself to do this stuff. I promise you can. Make sure you're subscribed to this podcast. Make sure you stay tuned with us and you will be able to do this stuff. I promise you. That is the stuff we teach here. Is how to set up your financial foundation, how to set up a base, how to automate the whole process so you don't have to spend so much time thinking about it, how to think about the things that actually matter with your money, and how to build wealth and how to grow your money. That's what we're here for, is to teach you that stuff. And so over time, you're going to put in the time, you're going to put in the work, and you're going to see that your net worth is going to grow over time. And that's exactly why we do this stuff, is to show you that. So I'm so incredibly excited for each and every single one of you listening to this podcast. I think that if you're just getting started, it is amazing. If you're listening because you're just shocked by some of these stats, they are really shocking. And it is one of those things that we all need to work together, talk about money more, teaching each other about money more so that we can all start to build wealth. I believe anybody in this world can build wealth. And I want you to start today if you haven't started. Or if you're making progress, I want you to tell me about that too. So I really appreciate each and every single one of you listening to this two-part series. Really, really excited for some of the stuff we have coming up in the future. The rest of this year and next year is going to be the best years that you guys have yet financially. I know it's going to be, and we're going to be giving you as many resources as possible to help you through that process. Listen, again, if you guys have any questions, make sure you drop me a line make sure you drop me an email. I will make sure to either read it, and if I don't get back right away, sometimes it takes me a couple weeks because we get so many emails now. So sometimes it takes me a little bit to get back to you, but I promise you, I've read it, and sometimes it's going to appear on the show. Sometimes I may just respond to you via email, but we will go through all those and make sure we are giving back to you guys, because that's the entire goal, is to give back to you guys as much as we possibly can. Again, thank you guys so much for listening. We truly appreciate you, and we will see you on the next episode.